The Great Bottled Water Scam. 7 reasons you should think twice before drinking it again. What if the cleanest thing in your shopping cart was one of the most misleading? What if that bottle of water you trust, the one with the glacier, the mountain, the crystal clear label, is not really a symbol of health, but one of the most successful marketing tricks of modern life? Because bottled water does not just sell hydration, it sells fear. Fear of the tap, fear of uncertainty, fear that the water already available to you somehow isn't pure enough, and that fear has made people do something almost unbelievable. Pay a premium for water, wrapped in plastic, often with less transparency than they imagine, and with a long list of trade-offs nobody puts on the label. Tonight we're breaking that illusion wide open, not with recycled internet drama, not with lazy fear-mongering, with 7 uncomfortable truths that may completely change how you look at bottled water forever. And the first one is the biggest lie of them all. Reason number 1, bottled water sells purity, but the label is doing most of the work. Let's start with the part nobody wants to admit. Most people do not buy bottled water because they tested it. They buy it because it feels cleaner. That's the trick. A mountain on the label, a blue cap, a transparent bottle, a name that sounds like it was whispered by a waterfall. And just like that, your brain fills in the rest. Cleaner, safer, better. But bottled water is not automatically superior just because it looks expensive and came from a cooler. That's the scam. The bottle creates the illusion of purity before you even take the first sip. And once that illusion is in your head, the whole game is won. Because now you're not drinking water. You're drinking a story. A story that says the sink is suspicious and the plastic bottle is protection. That story has made people walk past perfectly drinkable water, ignore public fountains, and spend ridiculous amounts of money on something they already had access to. And here's the part that should bother you. Sometimes what people are paying for is not rare mountain water. Sometimes they're paying for a lifestyle fantasy wrapped around ordinary water and plastic. That alone would be enough to make this whole industry look shady. But now we get to the second reason, and this is where the conversation stops being philosophical and starts getting microscopic. Very microscopic. Reason number 2, your pure water may come with a side of plastic. This is the part where bottled water's image starts cracking fast, because one of the biggest things people want to avoid by choosing bottled water is contamination. And yet one of the biggest modern concerns tied to bottled water is the bottle itself. Tiny plastic particles, microplastics, nanoplastics. Fragments so small you would never see them, never taste them, never suspect them. And that is exactly what makes this so disturbing. You can't filter it with your eyes. You can't spot it with your tongue. You can't tell by how expensive the bottle was. You just trust the package. And that trust is where the industry gets away with murder on the imagination, because the average buyer sees a sealed bottle and thinks, untouched, sterile, pure, but the reality is much uglier. The cap, the bottle, the processing, the handling, all of it can become part of the exposure story. Now let's be honest, because being dramatic is easy and being accurate is harder. Scientists are still learning exactly what long-term microplastic and nanoplastic exposure means in the human body. That uncertainty matters, but let me flip that around. If you are buying bottled water to feel safer, uncertainty is not reassuring. It's the opposite. Because the whole emotional contract of bottled water is this: I pay more, so I get peace of mind. But if the product itself is introducing a whole new question mark into the equation, then what exactly are you paying for? And here's the answer nobody in marketing wants printed on the label. You may be paying to feel better about the water, while swallowing more of the packaging than you ever imagined. And now the next part gets even more ridiculous, because it's not just what's inside the bottle, it's what happens to the bottle once real life starts touching it. Reason number 3, heat turns convenience into a bad experiment. Let me ask you something. Have you ever left a bottled water in the car? Of course you have. On the seat, in the cup holder, in a gym bag, in the sun, at the beach, in the back of a truck, forgotten for hours, maybe days. That's not weird. That's normal life. And that is exactly the problem. Because normal life is not a perfect laboratory. Bottled water does not exist in some magical, untouched environment. It gets stored, transported, squeezed, heated, shaken, stacked, and forgotten. And every time people say, relax, it's just water, they skip the most obvious part. It's not just water. It's water sitting inside plastic, moving through a hot, messy, real-world system. That matters. Now let's stay precise. Not every scary plastic claim online is accurate. People love throwing around chemical buzzwords without understanding what kind of bottle they're even holding. But the broader point remains brutally simple. Heat and plastic are not a romance story. The longer that bottle sits in bad conditions, the more questions you should be asking, not fewer. And yet what do most people do? They keep drinking, because the label still says pure. That is the genius of the illusion. Even when the conditions are bad, the branding keeps whispering the same promise. And once you realize that, the next reason becomes almost offensive. Because after all the plastic, the uncertainty, the storage issues, the emotional manipulation, you are still paying extra for it. A lot extra. Reason number 4, bottled water, is one of the most absurd rip-offs in modern life. Let's stop pretending this is normal. You are paying premium prices for water, not medicine, not a rare nutrient, not a luxury wine aged in a cave by monks. Water. And in many cases, you are paying hundreds or even thousands of times more than what comes out of the tap. Think about how insane that is. You are not buying hydration alone. You are buying branding, plastic, transport, shelf placement, marketing, psychology. You are buying the idea that expensive means safer. That idea has emptied millions of wallets. And here's what makes it even worse. The people who buy bottled water most often are usually not buying it because they're rich and carefree. They're buying it because they've been trained to distrust what they already have. That means this is not just a consumer habit, it's a highly profitable manipulation of insecurity. People skip refillable bottles, they skip home filters, they skip the water they've already paid for through public systems, and instead they keep buying the same overpriced convenience item again and again and again. One bottle doesn't look like much. That's how the scam hides. But multiply that by days, weeks, months, years, and suddenly you're looking at a habit that drains money almost invisibly. A few dollars here, a few dollars there, a case for the house, a bottle at the gas station, another at the airport, another at the gym, and before long, you've spent a small fortune trying to feel safer, while getting a product that may be less impressive than the label wants you to believe. And now the next reason explains why so many people never question it. They assume somebody, somewhere, is watching every bottle like a hawk. That assumption is more comforting than correct. Reason number 5, the oversight story is not as reassuring as people think. Ask the average person why they trust bottled water, and you'll hear some version of this. Well, it has to be regulated. Sure, but that sentence is doing a lot of emotional lifting, because most people have never actually looked at how differently consumers experience transparency with bottled water versus their local tap supply. They just assume the bottle means control, that the label means scrutiny, that the seal means certainty, that the product must have passed through some elite purity temple before reaching the shelf. That is the fantasy. The reality is less cinematic. Public tap systems are often subject to routine monitoring and public reporting that people can actually look up if they bother. Bottled water may meet standards too, but the average consumer usually gets far less real visibility into the source, the testing context, the storage history, and the full story behind the product. And that difference matters, because transparency is not the same as trust. One can be earned, the other can be manufactured, and bottled water has mastered the art of manufactured trust. A beautiful bottle, a neat brand name, a calm color palette, a word like natural, spring, or pure. That's all it takes. And once the emotional trust is installed, people stop asking the harder question, what do I actually know about what I'm drinking? Usually the answer is, not much. And the next reason is even sneakier, because it affects people who think they are making the healthiest choice for their families, especially for children. Reason number 6, the healthier choice may quietly leave out something important. Here's a trade-off a lot of people never see coming. They switch from tap to bottled water because they believe they're upgrading their health, while possibly giving up something that can matter for dental protection. Fluoride. Now this topic gets emotional fast, so let's keep it simple. In many places, tap water has fluoride at levels designed to help prevent tooth decay. Bottled water? Not always. Sometimes very little, sometimes none worth mentioning. And that means the person proudly choosing bottled water every day, especially for their kids, may not be making the healthier swap they imagine. That is such a perfect example of how marketing hijacks common sense. Because bottled water feels premium, it feels controlled, it feels cleaner. It feels like an upgrade, but sometimes the expensive option is not more complete. Sometimes it's just more fashionable, And that should make you stop, because once you realize bottled water can be more expensive, more plastic heavy, less transparent to the consumer, and not necessarily a better everyday health choice, the final reason hits with full force, because now we zoom out, way out, beyond your wallet, beyond your mouth, beyond your kitchen, to the planet itself. Reason number 7, single-use bottled water is a planetary mess disguised as convenience. This is the part people know, and still somehow ignore. One plastic bottle looks harmless. That's the lie scale depends on, because no one gets emotionally crushed by one bottle. But one becomes 10, 10 becomes 100, 100 becomes millions, then billions. Now it's not a bottle anymore, it's a system. A system built on plastic, oil, manufacturing, transportation, refrigeration, warehousing, and waste, all to move water around in disposable shells for people who often already had access to water nearby. That is not efficiency, that is absurdity in industrial form, and the environmental insult is hard to overstate. These bottles do not disappear because you finish the water. They linger, they pile up, they get dumped, they break down slowly. They scatter into landfills, waterways, oceans, and food chains. And the most insulting part, the whole thing is sold as modern convenience. Convenience for whom? Not for the beaches, not for the wildlife, not for future generations, not for the cities spending money cleaning up plastic waste. This is convenience in the same way setting your living room on fire is a heating strategy. It solves one tiny immediate want by creating a much larger long-term problem. And once you see the full picture, bottled water starts looking less like a health product and more like one of the strangest normalized habits of our time. So let's land this. What should you do instead? Don't become extreme, become smarter. If your tap water is safe, use it. If the taste is the problem, filter it. If your building has real plumbing issues, solve the actual issue instead of blindly buying endless plastic. If you need bottled water for emergencies, travel, or places with unreliable infrastructure, fine, use it strategically, but stop treating it like a default symbol of health. A stainless steel bottle makes more sense. A good home filter makes more sense. A refill habit makes more sense. Actually checking your local water quality makes more sense, because the biggest thing bottled water sells is not hydration. It sells emotional distance from fear, distance from the tap, distance from uncertainty. Distance from the idea that what you already have might be good enough. But good enough is not the insult marketing turned it into. Sometimes good enough is cheaper, cleaner in the bigger picture, less wasteful, and less dependent on plastic. That bottle in your hand was never just a bottle. It was a story about purity, a story about safety, a story about status, a story so powerful that people stopped asking what they were really buying. If this video changed the way you see bottled water, hit like so more people can find it. Share it with someone who buys bottled water every day because they think it's automatically cleaner. And now I want you in the comments. What shocked you the most? The microplastics, the markup, the missing transparency, the fluoride issue, or the environmental damage? And be honest, after this video, are you still going to trust the bottle the same way? Because once you see the illusion, you can't unsee it.